The Ashford ball glitters under 1,000 crystal pendants, a universe of captured light. When the music stops, a single, horrified gasp announces the theft of the Duke's sapphires, and every eye in London turns to one woman. Lady Ashford, her face a mask of theatrical shock, points a trembling finger. "It was her," she breathes, the accusation slithering through the silence. "Lady Seraphina Bexley." As if on cue, a guard stoops, his gloved hand rising to display a single, malevolent blue spark on the marble floor, discovered near the toe of Seraphina's silk slipper. It is a perfect, damning twin to the gems that had, moments before, graced the Duchess's throat. The collective gasp of the ton is a verdict delivered before any trial could begin. Seraphina's world narrows to a single point. Alistair, the Duke of Blackwood. He is her family's friend, her protector since her father's health had waned, the man whose quiet approval she had always sought. She turns to him, her eyes a desperate, silent plea for reason, for defense. He meets her gaze across the suddenly vast ballroom, and for a heart-stopping second, she sees something flicker in the depths of his gray eyes. Agony, perhaps. But it vanishes, replaced by a mask of cold, impenetrable duty. He clenches his jaw. He says nothing. His silence is a hammer blow, a public conviction more damning than any spoken word. The carriage ride home is a journey through a nightmare. Rain streaks down the window, blurring the gas lamps of London into weeping stars. Seraphina sits numb, the velvet seat cold beneath her trembling hands. It was not the accusation that shattered her, but the silence. Alistair's silence. It echoes in her mind, a question without an answer, a betrayal without a reason. Her own reflection in the rain-streaked glass is a pale, unrecognizable ghost. In the Duke of Blackwood's study, shadows cling to the book-lined walls like accusations. Alistair stands behind his massive desk, a fortress of polished mahogany between them. He does not meet her gaze as he speaks, his voice the cool, detached tone of a judge passing sentence. "To avoid the stain of a public trial," he says, "you will withdraw from society." Her father, seated beside her, seems to shrink with every word. "You will leave for Stonegate at dawn. It is a respectable dower house. You will be comfortable." When Seraphina finally finds her voice, a desperate whisper. "Why?" He simply looks away, toward a letter on his desk, its wax seal already broken. After the Duke departs, leaving the scent of cold rain and finality in his wake, Seraphina turns to her father. He is a ghost in his own chair, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with the silent sobs of a broken man. "I am so sorry, my child," he whispers, his voice choked with shame. In that moment, watching his grief, Seraphina understands she is utterly alone. A strange, cold calm settles over her, a flicker of steel in the ruin of her heart. She will not break. She will endure this. Later, in the quiet of her bedroom, Seraphina packs a small trunk. The shimmering ball gowns, the ropes of pearls, the life she knew, all are left behind in the silent wardrobe. She chooses only the simplest things, dresses of plain wool and linen. As she closes the lid on her jewelry box, her gaze falls upon a letter on her writing desk, an invitation that had arrived from Alistair that very morning. Her breath catches. The wax seal bearing the Blackwood crest has a tiny, almost imperceptible tear along its edge, as though it had been hastily opened and resealed. A sliver of unease, sharp and cold, pierces through her numb despair. In the gray pre-dawn chill, a plain carriage waits like a hearse. Seraphina does not look back at the grand London townhouse that has been her entire world. She steps into the carriage without a word, her posture erect, her face a mask of calm dignity she does not feel. The heavy thud of the closing door is the sound of a chapter, a life ending. From the window of his study, Alistair watches the carriage turn the corner and disappear. The damask curtain is crushed in his white-knuckled grip. His reflection in the glass is a man haunted, his carefully constructed facade of ducal control fractured by a profound hidden pain. "May God forgive me," he whispers to the empty room as the carriage vanishes from sight. "I cannot forgive myself." A single tear escapes, a traitor to his resolve, and he wipes it away with a gesture of savage anger. Stonegate sits in a valley, a house of honey-colored stone that seems to have been forgotten by time. Ivy climbs its walls and the gardens are a riot of beautiful neglect. A stern-faced housekeeper greets Seraphina with a curtsy and a quiet, "Welcome, my lady." The air inside is cool and smells of beeswax and damp stone. It is not a prison of bars and locks, but one of profound, echoing loneliness. Yet in the way the afternoon light slants through a dusty window, she feels a strange, melancholic peace. Her first night at Stonegate is an eternity of silence. In the vast, cold bedroom, she lies awake, staring at the shadows dancing on the canopy above. Here, with no one to see, she allows the waves of grief to crash over her. The humiliation, the confusion, the searing pain of Alistair's betrayal. She weeps until there are no tears left, a silent, shuddering catharsis in the dark. The house seems to absorb her sorrow, its ancient stones holding the secrets of her heartbreak as they have held others for centuries. The next morning, exploring the grounds, she finds it. A walled garden, its gate rusted half shut. Inside, chaos reigns. Weeds choke what were once immaculate beds, and thorny wild canes sprawl where manicured roses must have bloomed. But the bones of it are still there. A stone sundial, a crumbling brick path, the ghost of a magnificent design. In a nearby potting shed, she finds a pair of stiff, dirt-caked gardening gloves. She pulls them on, her decision made in an instant. "Something beautiful will grow here again," she whispers to the silence, a vow made not to God or to a man, but to herself. The days that follow fall into a rhythm of labor. From dawn until dusk, Seraphina works in the walled garden. The physical exertion is a balm, quieting the storm in her mind. Her soft hands grow calloused, her pale skin is kissed by the sun, and muscles she never knew she possessed ache with a satisfying weariness. Slowly, painstakingly, she clears a small patch of earth, pulling weeds, cutting back the dead growth, turning the soil. It is a battle against chaos, and with each weed pulled, she feels she is reclaiming a piece of herself. A month into her exile, a package arrives. It is a simple wooden box with no return address. Inside, nestled in soft paper, is a bank draft for a generous allowance, far more than she would need. Tucked with it is a small, stiff card. On it, in elegant, familiar script, is a single sentence, "For the roses." There is no signature, but she does not need one. She knows Alistair's handwriting as well as her own. She stares at the note, her heart a confusion of anger and a strange, unwelcome flicker of something else. "Why?" she whispers. "Why would you do this?" Seraphina accepts the money, but on her own terms. It is a tool, nothing more. She hires a strong lad from the village to help with the heavy digging and sends away for catalogues of rare rose bushes. She then pens a brief formal letter to the Duke's solicitor in London. "Kindly inform His Grace," and she writes, "that the funds for the maintenance of the Stonegate estate have been received and are being put to good use." She signs it with a steady hand, sealing the letter with plain wax. She would be his charge, his exile, but she would not be his charity. Necessity draws her to the nearby village. The shopkeepers and tenants are wary at first, their eyes filled with cautious curiosity about the disgraced lady from the dower house. But her quiet dignity, her gentle manner, and her genuine interest in their lives slowly win them over. One afternoon, while buying ribbon, the shopkeeper mentions the recent death of the Duke's younger brother, Lord Julian. "A terrible shame," the woman says, her voice hushed. "Such a charming young man, but a terrible bout of fever took him. So sudden." The name hangs in the air, another piece of a puzzle she doesn't understand. That evening, as dusk settles over the garden, Seraphina gently tends a newly planted rose bush, the torn wax seal, the anonymous money, the sudden death of a brother she barely knew. The pieces swirl in her mind, refusing to form the simple picture of her guilt. This was not just about a theft. A cold resolve settles in her heart. She will find the truth, not for the society that condemned her or the man who betrayed her, but for the woman kneeling in the dirt who refused to be a ghost. "They wrote a story of my guilt," she vows to the rising moon. "I will find the story of the truth. Before this is over, someone will speak it aloud." In his London study, Alistair stares at the portrait of his younger brother. Lord Julian's painted eyes are full of charming recklessness, a stark contrast to the memory that haunts Alistair's waking hours. He sees Julian on his deathbed, skin slick with fever, his hand clutching Alistair's with terrifying strength. "Promise me, Allie," he'd begged, his voice a rasp. "Don't let them know what I did. Protect my name." Alistair had made the vow. Now, he raises a glass of brandy to the portrait, the amber liquid doing nothing to burn away the guilt that eats at him like acid. Another unsigned package arrives at Stonegate. This time, it is a heavy crate of books. As Seraphina unpacks them, her hands lingering on the scent of worn leather and paper, she finds a volume of poetry. Tucked between the pages is a single, perfectly pressed crimson rose, the very shade she has been cultivating in her restored garden. He knows. He is watching somehow. She feels a chill, but it is not entirely unpleasant. Deeper in the crate, she finds a dry academic text on geology, a strange and seemingly random inclusion among the poetry and novels. Later, in the quiet of the Stonegate Library, curiosity draws her to the geology book. As she idly flips through the pages, her fingers catch on the faint texture of pencil marks. In the margins of a chapter detailing the origins of sapphires, someone has written frantic, barely legible notes, calculations of weight, value, and clarity. The handwriting is not Alistair's elegant script. It is a desperate scrawl. A jolt goes through her. These were Julian's notes. She is sure of it. He was not just interested in sapphires. He was obsessed with their worth. Alistair sits in the smoky haze of his London club, the low murmur of conversation a grating noise in his ears. He catches a snippet from a nearby table. Two lords, their voices smug with gossip. "Bexley was in dire straits, I hear. Investments failed. The girl had every reason to be desperate." Alistair's hand tightens around his glass, the crystal groaning in protest. He knows the truth, knows Seraphina's innocence, yet the poison of a plausible motive seeps into the air. The rumor is a lie, but it is a lie that society would so easily believe. Seraphina knows she cannot solve this puzzle alone. She needs information, a piece of the life Julian lived in London. She sits at her desk and pens a carefully worded letter to a childhood friend, a young woman still in the heart of the ton. She fills the page with casual inquiries about the season, about mutual acquaintances, and then, nestled among the pleasantries, a subtle question. Had her friend seen much of Lord Julian Blackwood in his final months? She seals the letter, her hopes resting on the reply. Mr. Croft, the Duke's valet for 30 years, moves with silent efficiency in the dressing room. As he adjusts the Duke's cravat, his eyes meet his master's in the mirror. Alistair is staring at the velvet-lined case on his dresser, the empty space where the sapphire necklace once lay. Croft's gaze is not judgmental, but filled with a deep, weary sympathy. A silent acknowledgement passes between them, the shared burden of a terrible secret. "Will that be all, Your Grace?" Croft asks, his voice perfectly neutral. "Yes, Croft," Alistair replies, his voice heavy. "That will be all." One morning, a flash of color in the garden catches her eye. She walks closer, her heart quickening. There, on a bush she had nurtured back from a thorny skeleton, is the first bloom. It is a single, perfect rose of the deepest crimson, its petals like velvet, holding a drop of morning dew like a tiny jewel. A genuine, unburdened smile touches Seraphina's lips for the first time in months. It is a small victory, but it is hers. "There you are," she whispers, as if greeting an old friend. The reply from her friend arrives a week later. Seraphina's hands tremble as she breaks the seal. The letter is warm and friendly, but the information it contains sends a chill down her spine. Her friend writes that in his last season, Julian was seen often in the company of a notorious moneylender, a Mr. Thorne. His illness, she adds, was shockingly sudden, and some whispered it was more than just a fever. The letter ends with a stark warning. "Be careful, Sarah. These are dangerous waters you are treading." The rumors about Seraphina's father, though false, gnaw at Alistair. His anonymous gifts, his silent watching, it is not enough. He has left her to face the whispers alone, a passive guardian who has done nothing to guard her. A sudden, fierce resolve cuts through his guilt. He must see her. He must know for himself that she is well, that his cowardly solution has not broken her spirit completely. He strides from his study, his voice sharp and clear as he gives the order to his butler. "Prepare the carriage. I am going to Stonegate." Seraphina hears the carriage on the gravel drive, and her heart freezes. It is him. She braces herself, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and opens the heavy oak door. But the man standing on the threshold is not the Duke. It is Mr. Croft, his elderly face etched with worry, his hat in his hands. He has come alone. "My lady," he says, his voice low and urgent, "forgive this intrusion. I have come without his grace's knowledge. We must speak." The world seems to tilt on its axis. In the quiet parlor, with a fire crackling in the hearth, Mr. Croft tells her everything. His voice is a steady, sorrowful murmur as he unravels the truth. Lord Julian, crippled by gambling debts to the ruthless Mr. Thorne, had not just planned to steal the sapphires, he had already sold them. He staged the theft to cover his crime, intending to replace the gems with paste. But Alistair had discovered the truth, and a terrible argument had followed. Shortly after, the fever took hold, and on his deathbed, Julian extracted the vow. "His Grace believed he was choosing the lesser of two evils, my lady," Croft finishes, his voice heavy with regret. "He chose to sacrifice a reputation he believed could be mended, over a legacy that would be shattered forever." The truth lands not as a relief, but as a devastating weight. She understands now, but understanding does not erase the sting of the injustice. "He chose his brother's memory over my life," she says, her voice flat and hollow. She looks at the old valet, her eyes searching his. "Why are you telling me this now?" Croft meets her gaze, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "Because the Duke is destroying himself with this vow," he says quietly, "and because you, my lady, have shown more honor in exile than many show in a palace. You deserve the truth." As Mr. Croft prepares to take his leave, a movement at the end of the long drive catches Seraphina's eye. A lone rider, urging his horse forward at a reckless pace. The man's form is unmistakable, even at a distance. The Duke of Blackwood. "He is here." She turns from the window, her voice devoid of emotion. "He is here." Mr. Croft's face pales. His act of conscience, his betrayal of his master, is about to be discovered. Alistair swings down from his horse, his face a mask of anxious concern. He sees Croft in the doorway and stops dead, shock and then a flash of anger in his eyes. He turns to Seraphina, his mouth opening to demand an explanation, to speak, to do something. But the words die on his lips. She is looking at him not with the fury he expected, nor the hurt he deserved, but with a profound, sorrowful pity. The power dynamic between them shatters and reverses in a single, devastating moment. "I know, Your Grace," she says, her voice quiet but clear. "I know everything." Her words strip away his composure like a physical blow. The Duke of Blackwood, the master of control, looks utterly lost. He runs a hand through his perfectly arranged hair, disheveling it for the first time she has ever seen. He turns to Croft and dismisses him not with a roar, but with a weary, defeated sigh. Facing Seraphina again, his voice is strained, broken. I thought I was choosing the lesser of two evils. I thought—" His justifications sound hollow, even to his own ears. Her powerful, knowing silence is his undoing. She says nothing, but turns and leads him through the house to the walled garden. The late afternoon sun illuminates a space transformed. Roses of every shade climb the walls, their scent heavy in the air. The chaos is gone, replaced by vibrant, orderly beauty. "This," she says, her voice soft but firm, "is what I built from the ruins you left me." He looks from the flowers to her face, stunned into silence by the physical proof of her resilience. He finally confesses the anonymous gifts. "I wanted to help. It was all I could do." She meets his gaze, her own clear and steady. It was not enough. An impossible truce settles over the house that night. They share a meal at opposite ends of the long dining table, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. He asks her about Stonegate, about the village, about the garden, his questions filled with a genuine, painful need to understand the life he condemned her to. She answers with a cool, polite precision, offering facts but no comfort. She will not grant him the solace of easy forgiveness. He has borne witness to her strength. Now he must bear witness to her pain. As they sit in the parlor after dinner, the sound of a horse ridden hard breaks the stillness. An express rider, bearing an urgent message for the Duke. Alistair breaks the seal, his eyes scanning the page. The color drains from his face. The letter is from the moneylender, Mr. Thorne. He knows Alistair knows the truth about the sapphires, and he is demanding an exorbitant sum for his silence. The final sentence is a chilling threat against the reputations of all parties involved. A clear and venomous finger pointed directly at Seraphina. Seraphina sees the terror in his eyes and stands. "What is it?" she demands, her voice sharp. Stripped of his pride, his control, and now his secrets, Alistair finally breaks completely. He confesses the final, sordid piece of the puzzle, the blackmail. "My vow, my pride has endangered you," he says, his voice cracking with shame. "I thought I was containing a scandal, but I was only feeding a monster. And now my silence has given him power over us both." He looks at her, his eyes pleading, no longer a duke, but a desperate, broken man. In the face of his panic, a strange calm descends upon Seraphina. This is a problem to be solved, not a ghost to be feared. She walks to the library table where she left the evidence she has gathered. The geology book, the letter from her friend. "You have been reacting to your brother's memory," she says, her voice clear and strategic. "It is time we started acting for ourselves." She points to Julian's frantic notes. He was desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. The answer is here. We will go back to London, and we will face this man together. The journey back to London is a stark contrast to her lonely exile. They travel through the night, the carriage lamps cutting a swath of light through the darkness. They are no longer accuser and accused, but partners in a dangerous alliance. They lean over Julian's book together, deciphering his frantic notes, piecing together his last desperate weeks. Alistair watches her, her intelligent eyes scanning the page, her finger tracing a line of text, and a look of profound, dawning admiration transforms his features. He is seeing the woman she truly is for the first time. Their first move is a public one. The following afternoon, Alistair escorts Seraphina into one of London's most fashionable tea rooms. A wave of shocked whispers follows them to their table. The sight of the powerful Duke of Blackwood taking tea with the disgraced Lady Seraphina is a scandal in itself. She holds her head high, meeting every curious stare with unshakable composure. It is a calculated act of defiance, a message sent to the city's gossips, and more importantly, to a certain moneylender. They were not hiding. They were on the attack. That evening in the Duke's library, they find it. A cryptic reference in Julian's notes, a page number, and a title that corresponds to a dusty volume on the highest shelf. Alistair retrieves the book. As he opens it, a small, ornate key falls into Seraphina's waiting palm. Alistair stares at it, his breath catching in his throat. He recognizes it instantly. It is the key to a private lockbox his brother kept at the Bank of England, a box Alistair never knew existed. "That's it," Seraphina whispers. "That's where he kept his secrets." In his grimy office, Mr. Thorne receives the report of the Duke and Lady Seraphina's public appearance. A slow, cruel smile spreads across his face. He had expected the Duke to pay quietly, to scurry and hide. This open defiance is unexpected and amusing. He pulls a heavy ledger from a locked drawer, its pages filled with the secrets of powerful men. "Let them play their games," he murmurs to himself, flipping to a page marked Blackwood. The house always wins. He decides the time for quiet threats is over. The private viewing room at the bank is silent and cold. The bank manager, with a respectful bow, leaves them alone with the heavy metal lockbox. Alistair's hand is steady as he inserts the key and turns. The lock clicks open with a heavy final sound. They both hold their breath as he lifts the lid. But inside there is no velvet box, no glittering sapphire necklace. There is only a small leather-bound journal and a single letter, sealed with Julian's crest, addressed in his familiar hand to Alistair. "What is this?" Alistair asks, his voice tight with confusion. Alistair's hands tremble as he breaks the seal on the letter from the grave. Julian's words, written in the clear light of shame before the fever took him, are a devastating confession. He hadn't just staged the theft. He had already sold the necklace to Thorne weeks before to cover a gambling debt of catastrophic size. The plan to use paste replicas was a desperate, foolish attempt to hide the truth. "I've ruined us, Allie," the letter ends. "Buy them back. For mother's sake, protect my name." The full weight of his brother's weakness, his utter betrayal, crashes down on Alistair. While Alistair is reeling from the letter, Seraphina opens the journal. It is not a diary of feelings, but a cold, meticulous ledger. In his final months, terrified and trapped, Julian had started documenting every secret transaction he witnessed in Thorne's office. It is a detailed account of Thorne's entire blackmail enterprise, listing the names of a dozen of the most powerful men in London, the sums they paid, and the secrets they paid to protect. Seraphina looks up at Alistair, her eyes wide with shock. "He has them all," she breathes. "They have found Julian's true legacy, a weapon." The terrible choice crystallizes before them. Alistair stares at the ledger in Seraphina's hands, then at his brother's pleading letter. To use the ledger would be to destroy Thorne and free his victims, but the only way to introduce it as evidence would be to tell the entire sordid story of why his brother was keeping it. He would have to publicly confess Julian's crime, breaking his sacred vow and dragging his family's name through the mud. "If I use this, my brother's name is ruined forever," Alistair says, his voice hollow. Seraphina meets his gaze. "And if you don't, a villain continues to ruin the lives of others. What is the true meaning of honor, Your Grace?" Back in his library, an invitation rests on the silver tray. The Duchess of Rutland's annual masquerade ball, the pinnacle of the London season. Alistair picks up the heavy cardstock. He knows Thorne will be there, preening like a king among the very men he holds captive. Everyone will be there. Everyone, hidden behind a mask. He looks at the invitation, the gilded letters shimmering in the candlelight, and a look of grim, absolute resolve settles on his face. He has made his decision. The days leading up to the ball are a quiet storm of preparation. Alistair meets with his solicitor, laying out the legal framework for his public accusation. Seraphina, her hands steady, makes careful copies of the most damning pages of the ledger. Mr. Croft is dispatched on discreet errands, gathering written testimony from servants who witnessed Lord Julian's frantic state in his final days. They move with a shared, focused intensity, three conspirators assembling the pieces of a plan that will either redeem them or destroy them completely. On the evening of the ball, Alistair finds Seraphina standing by the drawing room window, a vision in deep blue silk, her mask resting in her hands. He comes to her side, taking her hand in his. His voice is low and sincere. "I made a promise to a ghost that cost you everything," he says. "Tonight, I make a new one to you. I will restore your name, no matter the cost to my own." It is more than an apology. It is a vow of allegiance, a confession of love in all but name. She turns her hand in his, her fingers lacing with his, a silent acceptance. In the carriage, they sit in a charged silence, the weight of what is to come pressing in on them. The gaslights of London flash across their faces, illuminating their tense, determined expressions. As the carriage slows, approaching the river of light and music, that is the Duchess's ball, Seraphina reaches out and gives his hand a firm, reassuring squeeze. He looks at her, his eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it needs no words. They are a united front, ready for the battle to come. They are ready. Their entrance causes a ripple that turns into a wave. The Duke of Blackwood, on his arm, the disgraced Lady Seraphina Bexley, both masked, moving through the glittering throng as if they owned it. Whispers follow them like the rustle of silk. From a balcony overlooking the ballroom, they survey the scene. They see Thorne, holding court near the champagne fountain, a wolf in peacock's clothing. They see his victims, their masks hiding nervous eyes. The stage is set. Alistair intercepts Thorne near the conservatory. The moneylender's smile is smug behind his hawk-like mask. "Your Grace," he sneers, "I trust you've come to discuss terms." Alistair's voice is ice. "Our discussion will be brief. You will receive no payment from me. Your enterprise of fear is over." Thorne's eyes narrow. "You'll ruin yourself to spite me," he hisses. Alistair gives a cold, slight smile. "Something," he says softly, "are more important than a reputation." He turns and walks away, leaving Thorne sputtering in his wake. Alistair walks to the center of the ballroom floor. He catches the eye of the orchestra leader on the dais and gives a single sharp nod. The conductor's baton freezes in midair. The sweeping waltz cuts off with a jarring dissonance. In the space of a heartbeat, a stunned, absolute silence falls over the 1,000 guests. Dancers halt, conversations die, and every single masked face in the grand ballroom turns towards the solitary figure of the Duke. With a slow, deliberate movement, Alistair removes his mask. His face is pale in the light of the chandeliers, but his eyes burn with resolve. His voice, when he speaks, is not loud, but it carries with perfect clarity to every corner of the silent room. "You all believe you were witness to a scandal 6 months ago," he begins. "You believe you know the truth of what happened in my family." He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle. "You are wrong." His voice rings out, clear and unequivocal. "Lady Seraphina Bexley is a woman of unimpeachable honor. She is innocent. She was the victim of a lie that, to my eternal shame, I allowed the world to believe." He turns and extends a hand toward the edge of the room. A pathway opens in the crowd as Seraphina, a vision of grace, walks to join him. She removes her own mask, her expression serene, and takes his hand. A collective, audible gasp sweeps through the ballroom. With Seraphina by his side, Alistair tells them the truth. He speaks of his brother's debts, of the sale of the sapphires, of the desperate deception. He then speaks of the deathbed vow that bound him to a terrible silence. His voice breaks, but he does not falter. "In my pride and my grief," he confesses, his gaze sweeping over the shocked faces, "I chose to protect the name of the dead over the life of the living. I sacrificed an innocent woman's honor on the altar of my family's reputation. There is no excuse for what I have done." He then turns his gaze hard as steel upon one man. He raises his hand and points directly at Mr. Thorne. "The man who held my brother in his thrall, and who has held many of you in the same prison of fear, is this man." He produces Julian's ledger. This is his record of extortion, his weapon of fear, and tonight, its power ends. Thorne, his face a snarl of fury, turns to flee. But the gilded ballroom doors are suddenly blocked by 2 impassive city guards who step forward from the shadows. The trap is sprung. The ballroom erupts into chaos. Thorne is taken into custody, shouting denials that no one hears. The men implicated in the ledger look first shocked, then ashamed, and then unmistakably relieved. The crowd's reaction to Alistair's confession shifts from shock at the scandal to a murmur of understanding, and then to a quiet, profound respect for his sacrifice. The Duchess of Rutland, the arbiter of their world, glides forward. She takes Seraphina's free hand in both of hers and kisses her on the cheek. "Welcome back, my dear," she says, her voice clear for all to hear. It is a coronation. Amid the swirling chaos of Thorne's arrest and the excited babble of the ton, Alistair and Seraphina exchange a look. Their work is done. With a quiet dignity, they turn and walk towards the exit. The crowd, which once would have shunned her, now parts for them with a newfound reverence. They step out of the hot, glittering ballroom and into the cool, quiet peace of the night air. They have faced the beast and won. They are free. In the carriage, the adrenaline of the night fades, leaving a quiet, shared exhaustion in its place. Alistair looks at Seraphina, his face filled with 1,000 questions he cannot bring himself to ask. She is the one who breaks the silence. "You were brave tonight," she says softly, her voice filled with a warmth he has not heard since before the scandal. "You chose honor over pride. It is not forgiveness, not yet, but it is validation. It is a beginning. And for now, it is enough." He helps her from the carriage at his townhouse, the gaslight casting a soft glow on their faces. "Is it enough?" he asks, his voice raw and vulnerable. "After all this, can you forgive me?" She looks at him, her expression serious and thoughtful. "You have earned back my respect, Alistair. You have earned my admiration." She pauses, her gaze holding his. "Forgiveness. Forgiveness is a path we will have to walk together, if you are willing to walk it with me." It is not the easy absolution he might have hoped for, but something far more precious, the promise of a future. They do not sleep. In the drawing room, as the London night gives way to a gray, misty dawn, they talk. He tells her of his brother, of the bright, charming boy and the desperate, weak man he became. She tells him of the silence of Stonegate, of the ache in her hands from pulling weeds, of the small, fierce joy of the first rose. The titles and scandals fall away, leaving 2 people sharing their scars in the quiet, honest light of morning. The foundation of something new is laid, stone by painful stone. Mr. Croft brings the morning papers with a hesitant expression. The headlines are enormous, sensational. The Blackwood Confession. Throne's web of lies exposed. Alistair scans the columns, his jaw tight, but the tone is not what he expected. The papers paint him not as a disgrace, but as a tragic figure who chose a difficult honor. They describe Seraphina as a paragon of grace and resilience. He looks across the breakfast table at her and gives a small, tired, wry smile. It seems, he says, I am a hero and a fool in equal measure. Later that day, he finds her arranging flowers in the drawing room. He stands for a moment, simply watching her, then clears his throat. Lady Seraphina, he begins, his tone formal, but his eyes full of warmth. May I have the honor of calling on you this afternoon? The simple, traditional courtesy is so starkly different from the way their story began that it brings a true, radiant smile to her face. I would be delighted, Your Grace, she replies. It is the beginning of their courtship, the one they should have had from the start. After a week in the glare of London's renewed attention, Seraphina feels a pull towards the quiet of the country. I wish to go home, she tells him, to my garden. Alistair agrees without a moment's hesitation. It is your home, he says, his voice soft with reverence, the one you made for yourself. I would be honored if you would let me share it. They leave the city not as exiles returning in disgrace, but as partners, choosing their own path, their own place. The journey to Stonegate this time is filled with quiet, hopeful conversation. The rose garden at Stonegate is in full, breathtaking bloom. They walk the paths together, the air thick with the scent of 1,000 flowers. She tells him their names, the Gallicas, the Damasks, the Albus, her voice filled with the quiet pride of a creator. He listens, his gaze moving from the vibrant petals to her face, seeing in the restored beauty of the garden a mirror of the woman beside him. He gently touches a velvety crimson petal, his gesture full of a reverence that is as much for her as it is for the flower. He has one last ghost to lay to rest. He reveals that he used his personal funds to quietly buy back the sapphire necklace from Thorne's creditors. He presents the velvet box to her. She opens it, the gems glittering with a cold, familiar fire. I don't expect you to wear it, he says quietly. I only wanted to restore what was taken. Its fate is for you to decide. She looks at the necklace, then at him, her expression thoughtful. She closes the box. Perhaps one day, she says softly, our daughter will wear it, and we will tell her it is a symbol not of scandal, but of the high cost of truth. They stand under a rose-covered arbor, the setting sun casting long shadows across the garden. He takes both of her hands in his. I made a vow to my brother that nearly destroyed us, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Now I make a new vow to you. I will spend the rest of my life earning the honor of standing in this garden with you. A tear traces a path down her cheek, but she is smiling. You already have, she whispers. He leans down and kisses her. A kiss not of apology or desperation, but of equals. A kiss of profound, patient, and finally, peaceful love. A year later, the garden is even more lush, more vibrant. Alistair, his ducal coat discarded and his sleeves rolled up, is helping Seraphina prune a climbing rose. Their movements are easy, practiced, a familiar dance. He nicks his finger on a thorn and she laughs, taking his hand to inspect the damage. He looks at her, radiant and happy in the afternoon sun, and knows that this simple, shared, sun-drenched peace is the only title, the only legacy that has ever truly mattered. We are all bound by promises, some to the living, some to the dead. We build walls of silence and call it honor, prisons of pride and call it protection. Alistair's story is not one of a perfect man, but of a broken one who found the courage to tear down his own walls and stand accountable in the ruins. Seraphina's is the story of a woman who discovered that the most beautiful gardens can grow in the soil of our deepest sorrows. True honor, perhaps, is not the absence of mistakes, but the costly, painful, beautiful courage to atone for them. Alistair paid for his silence with his pride. Seraphina paid for his vow with her happiness. What, dear listener, should redemption truly cost? In the weeks that follow, Seraphina sits in the morning room at Stonegate, a place that once echoed with her loneliness. The desk is piled not with seed catalogs, but with letters, invitations from the highest echelons of society, Notes of admiration, apologies from those who were quick to condemn. With a serene smile, she pens her replies, politely declining nearly every invitation to London. She has no more need for that world. She has built her own. Alistair becomes a student in the world she created. She finds him in the garden one afternoon, frowning at a rose bush, a pair of shears held awkwardly in his hand. She comes to his side, her hand gently guiding his, showing him the proper angle to make the cut. I can manage a dukedom, he says with a self-deprecating smile, but this rose seems to have the better of me. She laughs, a light, easy sound, and in that shared, simple moment, a new intimacy blooms between them, more real than any ballroom waltz. Mr. Croft comes to visit, not to the servant's entrance, but to the front door, where he is welcomed as an honored guest. Alistair clasps the old man's hand, his eyes full of a gratitude that goes beyond words. "Thank you, Croft," he says, his voice thick with emotion, "for your loyalty and for your betrayal. You saved me from myself." Later, Seraphina serves the valet tea with her own hands, a gesture of respect so profound it brings tears to the old man's eyes. "I only served the man I knew you could be, Your Grace," he replies, his voice steady. During a brief necessary trip to London, Alistair walks into his study and stops before the grand portrait of Lord Julian. For a long moment, he simply looks at the handsome, reckless face of the brother he loved and the ghost that haunted him. Then with a quiet resolve, he takes the painting down from the wall himself. He carries it to the dusty attic and covers it gently with a white dust sheet. It is not an act of anger, but of release. "Rest now, brother," he whispers into the silence and closes the door, leaving the past behind. The seasons turn at Stonegate. They watch the autumn leaves carpet the garden in gold and red. They walk hand in hand as the first frost silvers the grass. When the first snow falls, blanketing the world in a quiet peace, they sit by the fire, reading to each other, the silence between them comfortable and deep. The house that was once Seraphina's beautiful prison has become their shared sanctuary, its walls holding not sorrow, but the warmth of a healing love. The cycle of the seasons mirrors the slow, steady rhythm of their own mending. When spring returns, they walk into the garden together. In a central place of honor, they plant a new tree, a young oak sapling, its fragile branches reaching for the sun. As they firm the soil around its base, their hands touching in the dark earth, Seraphina places one of her own hands on her slightly rounded belly. A quiet, knowing smile passes between them. "It will take years to grow," Alistair says, looking at the young tree. "We have years," she replies, her eyes shining with the promise of the new life she carries. One evening, Alistair finds Seraphina in the drawing room, the sapphire necklace lying on a length of velvet before her. The candlelight causes the gems to glitter, but their fire seems softer now, less malevolent. She is not wearing it, simply looking at it with a calm, reflective expression. She looks up as he enters and smiles. "It's beautiful," she says, her voice peaceful. "Now that the ghosts are gone." He comes to her side and together they look at the object that once tore them apart, now just a beautiful, silent artifact of the past they survived. They sit on the porch at dusk, watching the sky bleed into shades of rose and gold over the quiet hills. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and blooming flowers. He turns to her, his voice soft in the growing twilight. "Are you happy, Seraphina? Truly?" She leans her head against his shoulder, her sigh one of perfect contentment. "I am more than happy, Alistair," she says. "I am at peace, and I am home." What is a vow? Is it an unbreakable chain, or a promise that must be tested against the light of a greater truth? Alistair was bound by a vow made in the shadow of death and grief, a promise that demanded the sacrifice of an innocent. His journey teaches us that sometimes the most honorable act is not to keep a vow, but to have the courage to break it when it leads to injustice, and to forge a new one in the light to the truth. Every heart has its own walled garden. Sometimes it is a place of order and beauty. Other times it is left to ruin, overgrown with the weeds of past hurts and choked by the thorns of regret. Seraphina, cast into her own lonely garden, chose not to wither, but to work. She reminds us that strength is not the absence of pain, but the quiet, daily labor of cultivating the ground it leaves behind, believing that something beautiful can grow there again. Redemption is never a gift. It is a wage earned through the hard currency of humility, accountability, and the painstaking work of rebuilding what was broken. It demands that we face the people we have harmed and bear witness to their pain without defense or excuse. It requires us to sacrifice our pride on the altar of what is right. Alistair paid for his silence with his pride and his reputation. Seraphina paid for his vow with her happiness. What, dear listener, should redemption truly cost? May you find the strength to tend your own gardens, to pull the weeds of resentment and plant the seeds of forgiveness. May you have the wisdom to know which vows to keep and which to gently release into the past. And may you find the courage to speak the truth, even when it is difficult, for it is in the light of honesty that all things eventually can be healed. Rest now and dream of truth spoken under candlelight, of love rebuilt from ashes, and of the quiet honor that lives not in our secrets, but in our courage to bring them to light. Until we meet again in another tale, may peace find you where you are. Years pass. The oak tree in the center of the garden is tall now, its branches offering a wide circle of shade. A young boy with his father's serious gray eyes and his mother's smile chases a butterfly across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Alistair watches him, his arm wrapped securely around Seraphina's shoulders as she holds their young daughter, whose hair shines like spun gold in the sun. The peace they found was not a fleeting season, but a deep and abiding climate of the heart. In her mother's dressing room, the little girl traces the facets of the famous Blackwood sapphires with a curious finger. "Is it a queen's necklace?" she asks, her voice full of awe. Seraphina smiles, stroking her daughter's hair. "It is a reminder, my love," she says gently. "A reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be remade into our greatest strengths." The painful history of the jewels has been polished away, leaving only a story of resilience to be passed down. They are older now, the silver at their temples, a testament to the seasons they have weathered together. They sit on the porch at Stonegate, watching the same sunset, their hands now wrinkled and familiar, intertwined. They don't need to speak. Their shared silence is a tapestry woven from a lifetime of conversations, of sorrows faced and joys celebrated. The love they built from ruins has become a fortress of peace, timeless and enduring against the fading light. After their long night of confession, Seraphina rings for a maid. "Please prepare the east guest chamber for his grace," she instructs, her voice gentle but firm. Alistair meets her eyes and gives a small, understanding nod. He has not yet earned the right to her bed, to the intimacy he once took for granted. The long, silent corridor between their rooms that night is a map of the distance they still have to cross. A journey he is now willing to make, one respectful step at a time. Breakfast is a quiet affair. The silence is not the cold, angry chasm that once separated them, but a new, tentative space of observation. He watches the way she adds honey to her tea, the way the morning light catches in her hair. She feels his gaze upon her, steady and searching, and for the first time she does not feel judged. She feels seen. It is a fragile, unspoken language, the first words of a new conversation between their souls. In the drawing room, she turns from a vase of flowers, her hand still holding a white rose, and asks him the question he least expects. "What was he like?" "Your brother." Not an accusation, not a demand for more apologies, but a simple, empathetic question. It unlocks something in him. He begins to speak of Julian, of his charm and his laughter, his recklessness and his weakness. In sharing the memory of his brother with her, he is finally sharing the true source of his own wound. The next day, Alistair goes alone to the modest London home of Seraphina's father. He stands before the older man, not as a duke, but as a penitent. "Sir, I failed in my duty to protect your daughter," he says, his voice clear and devoid of excuse. "I brought shame upon your house, and for that, I am profoundly and eternally sorry." The apology is so direct, so humble, that Seraphina's father, a man of quiet grace, extends his hand. "It takes a great man to admit a great wrong, Your Grace. You are welcome in my home." When he returns, Seraphina is waiting. She has already received a note from her father. "He was gracious," Alistair says simply, the relief evident in his voice. She looks at him, and a genuine, unrestrained warmth fills her eyes. "I know. It is in his nature to be kind," she says softly. Then she adds, And it seems, Your Grace, it is in yours as well. He feels her quiet validation like a balm on a burn, the first ray of true sunlight after a long, dark night. Back at Stonegate, in the room where she spent so many lonely hours, she leads him to her writing desk. She opens a bottom drawer and removes a thick bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. "This was my despair," she says, her voice steady. She does not offer them to him. Instead, she walks to the fireplace and places the bundle on the logs. "It does not need to be read," she says as the flames begin to lick at the paper. "It only needed to be acknowledged. Now, it is ash." He watches the physical evidence of her pain turn to nothing, his heart aching with a love so fierce it feels like breaking. Her act of release unburdens his own soul. As they watch the last of the letters burn, he makes his own confession. He tells her of the secret reports he demanded from his steward at Stonegate, of reading about her tireless work in the garden, of his growing awe and his deepening shame. "I was a coward," he says, his voice raw. "I admired your strength from afar because I was terrified to face the woman I had wronged. I was afraid of the reflection of my own dishonor in your eyes." The next morning, they walk to the village together. It is a quiet declaration. The villagers, who now greet Seraphina with familiar warmth, look upon the Duke with respectful curiosity. He is an accessory in her world, not the other way around. He sees the smiles she receives, hears the easy way she asks after a shopkeeper's child, and understands the depth of the life she built not from privilege, but from her own character. He has never been prouder or more humbled. On the path back to Stonegate, bordered by wildflowers she helped cultivate, their hands brush. It is a small, accidental touch, but it sends a current through them both. He hesitates for only a second, then tentatively, gently, he reaches for her hand. His fingers close around hers, a question asked without words. She does not pull away. Her own fingers curl around his, an answer given in faith. It is the first touch of a new beginning, a simple, profound joining that feels more significant than any kiss. He leads her to the center of her rose garden as dusk paints the sky in soft colors. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he begins, his voice trembling slightly. "But I must. Seraphina, will you let me try to build a life with you? Not as a duke, but as a man who has learned the meaning of honor from you. A man who loves you." She looks from his earnest, open face to the thriving garden around them. "A life begins with a single seed," she whispers, her eyes shining. "Let us see what will grow." Her hopeful words are all the answer he needs. In the heart of the garden she brought back to life, Alistair sinks to one knee. He opens a small box to reveal not a gaudy diamond, but a simple gold band set with a single, perfect sapphire, the color of a twilight sky. "I offer you not a title, but a heart," he says, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Not a vow of protection, but a promise of partnership. Lady Seraphina Bexley, will you do me the profound honor of becoming my wife?" Through her own joyful tears, she gives him her hand. "Yes," she breathes. "Oh, yes." Their wedding is not a grand affair in a London cathedral, but a quiet ceremony at dawn in the small village church. The guests are few but true, her father, his face beaming with pride, Mr. Croft standing as Alistair's witness, and the villagers of Stonegate, who fill the pews with their quiet, heartfelt support. The vows they exchange are not ancient words from a book, but personal promises whispered in the morning light. Promises of partnership, honesty, and a love that has been tested by fire and found to be true. He carries her over the threshold of Stonegate, the house she once entered as a prisoner, now her home as a beloved wife. Her laughter, a sound of pure, unburdened joy, echoes in the hall that was once so silent. She loops her arms around his neck, her eyes sparkling. "Welcome home, Your Grace," she says with a playful smile. He looks not at the house, but into her face, his entire world reflected there. "I am home," he replies and lowers her to the ground, their new life beginning in the place her old one ended. Later, they walk toward the walled garden. The old rusted gate has been replaced by a new one of dark, elegant iron, crafted by the village blacksmith. Alistair pushes it open for her, the hinges moving without a sound. They step through into their sanctuary, the air rich with the scent of roses and damp earth. He does not close the gate behind them. It remains open, an invitation to the world, a symbol that they have no more secrets to hide. In the dark of their shared bed, weeks later, a ghost of the past appears. He reaches for her in his sleep and she flinches, a small, involuntary tightening of her muscles. He wakes instantly, the movement pulling him from his dream. He withdraws his hand as if burned, the pain on his face sharp in the moonlight. "I'm sorry," she whispers into the silence. "It is a habit of fear I have not yet unlearned." He doesn't touch her, but moves closer, his warmth a silent promise. "Then," he whispers back, "we will face it together, until it is gone." Seraphina wakes one night to the cold emptiness of the bed beside her. She finds him in the library, a solitary figure staring into the dying embers of the fire. The weight of his guilt, a tangible presence in the room. She doesn't speak, knowing words are useless against such nightmares. Instead, she retrieves a heavy woolen blanket from a nearby chair, drapes it gently over his shoulders, and sits in the chair opposite, bearing silent witness to his struggle until the dawn light begins to break. A letter arrives on heavy, perfumed cream stationery. It is from Lady Ashford, the hostess of the ball that started it all. The words are a masterpiece of fawning apology and desperate pleading, ending with an invitation to her next grand event. Seraphina reads the letter, a small, wry smile playing on her lips. Without a word, she stands, walks to the morning room fireplace, and drops the letter into the flames, watching the elegant script curl into black ash. She no longer needs the approval of that world. Alistair's work changes. His desk at Stonegate is covered not in estate ledgers and social calendars, but in correspondence with legal reformers. Haunted by how easily a man like Thorne could prey on the desperate, he begins to quietly fund efforts to reform the nation's draconian debtors' laws. He uses his considerable influence not to protect his own name, but to create a world where fewer men are driven to the same desperate choices as his brother. His painful experience has been forged into a quiet, noble purpose. The garden continues to evolve. It is no longer just her sanctuary, but their shared project. They spend long, happy afternoons together, poring over sketches for a new fountain, debating the merits of a stone path versus a brick one. They work side by side in the dirt, their hands touching as they plant a new row of lavender. The garden, born of her solitude, now flourishes under the care of their partnership, a living testament to the love they are building together. They stand watching the sunset from the edge of the garden, their work for the day done. He turns to her, the golden light illuminating the raw emotion on his face. "I love you, Seraphina," he says, his voice thick and low. "Not for your grace or your beauty, but for the fierce, honorable heart of the woman who taught me everything that matters." She meets his gaze, her own eyes shining with tears of pure joy. "And I love you, Alistair, not for the Duke you are, but for the good man you have chosen to become." In the warm, fire-lit nursery a few years later, their young son asks for a bedtime story. Alistair pulls the small boy into his lap and glances at Seraphina, who watches them with a loving smile. "Once upon a time," Alistair begins, his voice a soft rumble, "there was a proud and foolish man who was lost in a dark wood, and he was saved by a very wise woman who showed him how to make a garden grow." He begins to tell their story, its sharp edges softened into a fairy tale of redemption. In his study, Alistair opens the ancient Blackwood family ledger, a book tracing his lineage back for centuries. He finds the entry for his brother, Lord Julian Blackwood, and with a steady hand, simply pens the date of his passing. There is no editorial, no excuse. Then he turns the page. He writes his own name, and beside it, with a flourish, Seraphina, Duchess of Blackwood. And below, the name of their son. He closes the heavy book, the past finally at peace, the future written and waiting. An ordinary morning at Stonegate. Sunlight streams into the breakfast room. Alistair reads a letter from his solicitor, a small smile on his face. Seraphina pours them both more tea, telling him of a new rose she wishes to order. Their son chatters happily from his high chair. There is no high drama, no lingering tension, only the beautiful, quiet rhythm of a shared life. After all the storms and scandals, this peaceful, mundane normalcy is the greatest paradise they could have ever hoped to find. It is the heaven they have earned. We are led to believe that healing means an erasure of scars, that to be whole is to be unmarked. But perhaps true healing is something different. It is the wisdom to see our scars not as deformities, but as the intricate golden tracery that tells the story of how we survived. Alistair's guilt made him compassionate. Seraphina's pain made her strong. Their love was not made beautiful despite their brokenness, but because of it, a tapestry woven from the threads of their deepest wounds. Years pass. The oak tree in the center of the garden is tall now, its branches offering a wide circle of shade. A young boy with his father's serious gray eyes and his mother's smile chases a butterfly across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Alistair watches him, his arm wrapped securely around Seraphina's shoulders as she holds their young daughter, whose hair shines like spun gold in the sun. The peace they found was not a fleeting season, but a deep and abiding climate of the heart. In her mother's dressing room, the little girl traces the facets of the famous Blackwood sapphires with a curious finger. "Is it a queen's necklace?" she asks, her voice full of awe. Seraphina smiles, stroking her daughter's hair. "It is a reminder, my love," she says gently, "a reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be remade into our greatest strengths. The painful history of the jewels has been polished away, leaving only a story of resilience to be passed down. They are older now, the silver at their temples a testament to the seasons they have weathered together." They sit on the porch at Stonegate, watching the same sunset, their hands now wrinkled and familiar, intertwined. They don't need to speak. Their shared silence is a tapestry woven from a lifetime of conversations, of sorrows faced and joys celebrated. The love they built from ruins has become a fortress of peace, timeless and enduring against the fading light. The great hall at Stonegate, which once held only the echo of Seraphina's lonely footsteps, now rings with a different sound. The joyful shrieks of children playing hide and seek, the thud of a stray ball against a wall, the low murmur of a father reading a story by the fire. The house that was once a vessel for silence and sorrow has been filled to the brim with the beautiful, chaotic music of a family. It is, finally, alive. At the dinner table, their son attempts a rather clumsy magic trick involving a dinner roll, which promptly vanishes under the table. Alistair catches Seraphina's eye, his expression one of mock stern ducal authority. She answers with a barely suppressed smile, a silent, shared joke that speaks of 1,000 such moments. In this small, private language of glances and hidden smiles, the true depth of their partnership is revealed. They sit together in the library in the evening, the fire crackling, each lost in their own book. On the shelf behind them, the geology text sits amongst the poetry and histories. It is just a book now. Its secrets have been brought into the light, its power to harm neutralized. Their life is like this room, warm, full of stories, and with no more secrets hidden in the margins. This quiet, shared peace is their final victory. What is a vow? Is it an unbreakable chain, or a promise that must be tested against the light of a greater truth? Alistair was bound by a vow made in the shadow of death and grief, a promise that demanded the sacrifice of an innocent. His journey teaches us that sometimes the most honorable act is not to keep a vow, but to have the courage to break it when it leads to injustice, and to forge a new one in the light to the truth. Every heart has its own walled garden. Sometimes it is a place of order and beauty. Other times it is left to ruin, overgrown with the weeds of past hurts and choked by the thorns of regret. Seraphina, cast into her own lonely garden, chose not to wither, but to work. She reminds us that strength is not the absence of pain, but the quiet, daily labor of cultivating the ground it leaves behind, believing that something beautiful can grow there again. Redemption is never a gift. It is a wage earned through the hard currency of humility, accountability, and the painstaking work of rebuilding what was broken. It demands that we face the people we have harmed and bear witness to their pain without defense or excuse. Alistair paid for his silence with his pride. Seraphina paid for his vow with her happiness. What, dear listener, should redemption truly cost? May you find the strength to tend your own gardens, to pull the weeds of resentment and plant the seeds of forgiveness. May you have the wisdom to know which vows to keep and which to gently release into the past. And may you find the courage to speak the truth, even when it is difficult, for it is in the light of honesty that all things eventually can be healed. Rest now and dream of truths spoken under candlelight, of love rebuilt from ashes, and of the quiet honor that lives not in our secrets, but in our courage to bring them to light. Until we meet again in another tale, may peace find you where you are. Years pass. The oak tree in the center of the garden is tall now, its branches offering a wide circle of shade. A young boy with his father's serious gray eyes and his mother's smile chases a butterfly across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Alistair watches him, his arm wrapped securely around Seraphina's shoulders as she holds their young daughter, whose hair shines like spun gold in the sun. In her mother's dressing room, the little girl traces the facets of the famous Blackwood sapphires with a curious finger. "Is it a queen's necklace?" she asks, her voice full of awe. Seraphina smiles, stroking her daughter's hair. "It is a reminder, my love," she says gently. "A reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be remade into our greatest strengths." They are older now, the silver at their temples a testament to the seasons they have weathered together. They sit on the porch at Stonegate, watching the same sunset, their hands now wrinkled and familiar, intertwined. Their shared silence is a tapestry woven from a lifetime of conversations, of sorrows faced and joys celebrated. The love they built from ruins has become a fortress of peace. The great hall at Stonegate, which once held only the echo of Seraphina's lonely footsteps, now rings with a different sound. The joyful shrieks of children playing hide-and-seek, the thud of a stray ball against a wall, the low murmur of a father reading a story by the fire. The house that was once a vessel for silence and sorrow has been filled to the brim with the beautiful, chaotic music of a family. At the dinner table, their son attempts a rather clumsy magic trick involving a dinner roll, which promptly vanishes under the table. Alistair catches Seraphina's eye, his expression one of mock stern ducal authority. She answers with a barely suppressed smile, a silent shared joke that speaks of 1,000 such moments. In this small, private language of glances and hidden smiles, the true depth of their partnership is revealed. They sit together in the library in the evening, the fire crackling, each lost in their own book. On the shelf behind them, the geology text sits amongst the poetry and histories. It is just a book now. Its secrets have been brought into the light, its power to harm neutralized. Their life is like this room, warm, full of stories, and with no more secrets hidden in the margins. What is a vow? Is it an unbreakable chain, or a promise that must be tested against the light of a greater truth? Alistair was bound by a vow made in the shadow of death and grief. His journey teaches us that sometimes the most honorable act is not to keep a vow, but to have the courage to break it when it leads to injustice. Every heart has its own walled garden. Sometimes it is a place of order and beauty. Other times it is left to ruin, overgrown with the weeds of past hurts. Seraphina, cast into her own lonely garden, chose not to wither, but to work. She reminds us that strength is not the absence of pain, but the quiet daily labor of cultivating the ground it leaves behind. Redemption is never a gift. It is a wage earned through the hard currency of humility, accountability, and the painstaking work of rebuilding what was broken. Alistair paid for his silence with his pride. Seraphina paid for his vow with her happiness. What, dear listener, should redemption truly cost? May you find the strength to tend your own gardens, to pull the weeds of resentment and plant the seeds of forgiveness. May you have the wisdom to know which vows to keep and which to gently release into the past. And may you find the courage to speak the truth, even when it is difficult, for it is in the light of honesty that all things eventually can be healed. Rest now and dream of truths spoken under candlelight, of love rebuilt from ashes, and of the quiet honor that lives not in our secrets, but in our courage to bring them to light. Until we meet again in another tale, may peace find you where you are. Years pass. The oak tree in the center of the garden is tall now, its branches offering a wide circle of shade. A young boy with his father's serious gray eyes and his mother's smile chases a butterfly across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Alistair watches him, his arm wrapped securely around Seraphina's shoulders as she holds their young daughter, whose hair shines like spun gold in the sun. In her mother's dressing room, the little girl traces the facets of the famous Blackwood sapphires with a curious finger. "Is it a queen's necklace?" she asks, her voice full of awe. Seraphina smiles, stroking her daughter's hair. "It is a reminder, my love," she says gently. A reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be remade into our greatest strengths. They are older now, the silver at their temples a testament to the seasons they have weathered together. They sit on the porch at Stonegate, watching the same sunset, their hands now wrinkled and familiar, intertwined. Their shared silence is a tapestry woven from a lifetime of conversations, of sorrows faced and joys celebrated. The love they built from ruins has become a fortress of peace. The great hall at Stonegate, which once held only the echo of Seraphina's lonely footsteps, now rings with a different sound. The joyful shrieks of children playing hide and seek, the thud of a stray ball against a wall, the low murmur of a father reading a story by the fire. The house that was once a vessel for silence and sorrow has been filled to the brim with the beautiful, chaotic music of a family. At the dinner table, their son attempts a rather clumsy magic trick involving a dinner roll, which promptly vanishes under the table. Alistair catches Seraphina's eye, his expression one of mock stern ducal authority. She answers with a barely suppressed smile, a silent, shared joke that speaks of 1,000 such moments. In this small, private language of glances and hidden smiles, the true depth of their partnership is revealed. They sit together in the library in the evening, the fire crackling, each lost in their own book. On the shelf behind them, the geology text sits amongst the poetry and histories. It is just a book now. Its secrets have been brought into the light, its power to harm neutralized. Their life is like this room, warm, full of stories, and with no more secrets hidden in the margins. What is a vow? Is it an unbreakable chain, or a promise that must be tested against the light of a greater truth? Alistair was bound by a vow made in the shadow of death and grief. His journey teaches us that sometimes the most honorable act is not to keep a vow, but to have the courage to break it when it leads to injustice. Every heart has its own walled garden. Sometimes it is a place of order and beauty. Other times it is left to ruin, overgrown with the weeds of past hurts. Seraphina, cast into her own lonely garden, chose not to wither but to work. She reminds us that strength is not the absence of pain, but the quiet, daily labor of cultivating the ground it leaves behind. Redemption is never a gift. It is a wage earned through the hard currency of humility, accountability, and the painstaking work of rebuilding what was broken. Alistair paid for his silence with his pride. Seraphina paid for his vow with her happiness. What, dear listener, should redemption truly cost? May you find the strength to tend your own gardens, to pull the weeds of resentment and plant the seeds of forgiveness. May you have the wisdom to know which vows to keep and which to gently release into the past. And may you find the courage to speak the truth, even when it is difficult, for it is in the light of honesty that all things eventually can be healed. Rest now and dream of truths spoken under candlelight, of love rebuilt from ashes, and of the quiet honor that lives not in our secrets, but in our courage to bring them to light. Until we meet again in another tale, may peace find you where you are. Years pass. The oak tree in the center of the garden is tall now, its branches offering a wide circle of shade. A young boy with his father's serious gray eyes and his mother's smile chases a butterfly across the lawn, his laughter echoing in the warm afternoon air. Alistair watches him, his arm wrapped securely around Seraphina's shoulders as she holds their young daughter, whose hair shines like spun gold in the sun. In her mother's dressing room, the little girl traces the facets of the famous Blackwood sapphires with a curious finger. "Is it a queen's necklace?" she asks, her voice full of awe. Seraphina smiles, stroking her daughter's hair. "It is a reminder, my love," she says gently. "A reminder that even the heaviest burdens can be remade into our greatest strengths." They are older now, the silver at their temples a testament to the seasons they have weathered together. They sit on the porch at Stonegate, watching the same sunset, their hands now wrinkled and familiar, intertwined. Their shared silence is a tapestry woven from a lifetime of conversations, of sorrows faced and joys celebrated. The love they built from ruins has become a fortress of peace. The great hall at Stonegate, which once held only the echo of Seraphina's lonely footsteps, now rings with a different sound. The joyful shrieks of children playing hide and seek, the thud of a stray ball against a wall, the low murmur of a father reading a story by the fire. The house that was once a vessel for silence and sorrow has been filled to the brim with the beautiful, chaotic music of a family. At the dinner table, their son attempts a rather clumsy magic trick involving a dinner roll, which promptly vanishes under the table. Alistair catches Seraphina's eye, his expression one of mock stern ducal authority. She answers with a barely suppressed smile, a silent, shared joke that speaks of 1,000 such moments. In this small, private language of glances and hidden smiles, the true depth of their partnership is revealed. They sit together in the library in the evening, the fire crackling, each lost in their own book. On the shelf behind them, the geology text sits amongst the poetry and histories. It is just a book now. Its secrets have been brought into the light, its power to harm neutralized. Their life is like this room, warm, full of stories, and with no more secrets hidden in the margins. What is a vow? Is it an unbreakable chain, or a promise that must be tested against the light of a greater truth? Alistair was bound by a vow made in the shadow of death and grief. His journey teaches us that sometimes the most honorable act is not to keep a vow, but to have the courage to break it when it leads to injustice. Every heart has its own walled garden. Sometimes it is a place of order and beauty. Other times it is left to ruin, overgrown with the weeds of past hurts. Seraphina, cast into her own lonely garden, chose not to wither, but to work. She reminds us that strength is not the absence of pain, but the quiet daily labor of cultivating the ground it leaves behind, believing that something beautiful can grow there again.